Hello and welcome to another Ben Code Swift programming tutorial here in the Ben Code Swift programming series, and today we're going to be talking about table views and continuing our project on table views that we started in the last video on table views, and going into some more advanced topics starting with styling. So let's jump right in. First thing you're going to want to do is open up the old table view project, table view test, where we created our shopping list. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a subtext here. I'm sure you've seen it in UI table views before, where there's the main text and then there's a smaller line of gray text below that provides some sort of additional information about the main text. And those are called detailed text views. So these are just text views, and then some cells can have a detailed text view. And so we're going to start by adding one of those that's static for each one. And we're going to talk about another new topic, another new type of thing that we haven't yet talked about to sort of make it dynamic. One thing we're going to do first is we're going to want to open up to the cell for row and index path method, because that's where cell styling really takes place. And so what we're going to need to do first is we're going to need to sort of change the styling of the cell. So in other words, when iOS initializes a cell, it needs to know what sort of pattern or what sort of layout it's going to create in the cell. And so there, what we're going to want to do first, we're going to reinitialize basically. Well, not reinitialize, but we're going to call sort of a type of sort of initializer type thing here. We're going to do that by just underneath our cell declaration. We're going to be setting cell equal to a UI table view cell, and we're going to be using the style and reuse identifiers here. And so we're going to be setting style to a UI table view cell style, and then the property of that we're going to use subtitle. And this just tells us that we want the specific style that has that subtitle built in. And for the reuse identifier, we're going to want to keep it the same as above, so we're going to use cell. And so basically what a reuse identifier does, and it's sort of a confusing topic, so if you don't quite get it yet, no big deal. A lot of people don't, but basically what a reuse identifier does is when iOS is creating a table view, it only loads the cells that are shown. So if this had 100 items in it, it would only have basically loaded the specific cells that are on your screen right now, not the whole 100. However, when you scroll and you load the additional cells that come up from the top and bottom, what iOS does first is it tries to see if there are any other cells with the existing style. In other words, if all of your cells had the same layout, so only the main text, you would use the same reuse identifier in all of them. So if you think of this, we can create a cell here, and we could theoretically do the same thing for two cells, right? And we could call this cell 2, cell 2, cell 2. And then if we wanted to, we could do some sort of if statement here where if some condition, right? If condition, and what we're going to do is we're going to return cell 2 first, and then otherwise we're just going to return the normal cell. And so basically this is a way of sort of styling cells differently. So what iOS looks for is when you load new cells, it says, okay, let's look in memory first. Are any of the cells that we've already loaded, because they've already appeared on the screen, do they match the same layout as the cells we're trying to create? And the only way for it to tell if they match the same layout is through the reuse identifier. So basically what iOS will do in that point is, instead of allocating more memory for 10 new cells, let's say, if you scroll down and add 10 to the screen, it will say, okay, we're going to not allocate any new memory for new cells. Instead, we're going to basically, I'm going to use the existing 10 that we already loaded and just change the values of the cells. So basically, it'll use these cells in memory and just change the text. So think of that's how reuse identifiers work. And that's why they're so helpful. It's really more of a memory management kind of a thing and a performance kind of a thing. So that's a little bit about reuse identifiers. Again, it's sort of a confusing theoretical topic in iOS. So, don't be worried about what it does or why it does, as much as know that all the same cell styles should have the same reuse identifier, and different styles should have different reuse identifiers. Otherwise, you could run into some problems. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to just, now that we have the subtitle styles, we can go cell.detail text label .text, and we're going to just set that to a static string. We're going to go detail information. Right, and so now if we run, you can see that we have all of our detailed information below. And so that's how, basically that's an example of the UI table view cell styles. And so before we talk about more of the cell styles, first we're going to be talking about, you know, how let's first fill in the specific detailed information for our shopping list. So what we're going to want to do is we're just going to go up here and we're just going to create. We're basically going to store our information for the detailed text in a different, you know, in a different thing than the array. Now there are a couple of options, obviously, that we could go about doing here. We could create we could create a class of grocery item where we stored all of the information, whether it be the detailed text, and we store the item, and we store the quantity, and then we can have an array called items of that item, or we could do something called a dictionary. And normally, I would probably create the class, just because, you know, object-oriented programming, you want to create an object for every real-world object. But for the sake of this, just so that we get familiar with dictionaries, we're going to be using that system. And dictionaries could be especially more helpful if per object there wasn't necessarily a specific thing the user sets as much as there's built-in kind of things. But anyway, we're gonna create a dictionary first. And basically how a dictionary works is it's like an array, but instead of having an index and a value, it has a key instead of an index, basically. So it's got a key and a value, and I'll show you what that means. So what we're going to first be doing is we're going to create a variable called item information. And we're not going to need to explicitly declare that here because it's a dictionary. But basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to use our same square brackets. And basically the key is a string, and the value can be sort of whatever you want to put in there. And so one of the images that I like personally is from a website called Making App Pie. And I really love what they do. You know, they're a great, you know, application blog, and they have a great picture that sort of explains the difference between arrays and dictionaries. So as you can see, and here, let me actually take that off a bit just to clear that up. And so as you can see, basically, if you're looking at an array, it's an ordered list. You've got an index 0 through 6, and each index is arranged by a or each value is arranged by that index. If you look at a dictionary, however, it's completely scattered. You don't use some sort of ordered index. You just use the key. And so that's the main difference between an array and a dictionary. And so obviously in the case of filling in a table view, you'd use an array because you want that sort of ordered information. You don't want it completely scattered. And you don't want to have to search by key. You know, you just want to be able to pull everything from an array, whereas you can't entirely do that with a dictionary because you need to know all the keys to be able to access that information. So that's the difference. And obviously the benefit of using a dictionary is you don't need to search through an array to find what you want. You can just search the key. Otherwise, you have to somehow remember the index, and the indexes can change. So that's why. So that's basically the difference between an array and a dictionary. And so we're gonna create a dictionary now, just so you get an idea of how to do that. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna first create our key. Our first key we're gonna call eggs is our first key, and the value we're gonna set is another string. And so we're gonna in here put by a carton of eggs, right? And then we're going to go milk. So we're going to go milk, and we're going to set that to buy 1 gallon. Then we're going to go flour, and we're going to set to buy 1 or buy a bag. We'll go baking soda, will be our next. And we'll set that to buy a box. Because I'm pretty sure baking soda is in boxes. Can I remember with baking powder? We're going to go steak, buy sirloin steak, and cheese, buy cheddar cheese. And so this is going to be our dictionary. As you can see, these are the keys for each item and then the descriptions. So now what we're going to do is to be able to sort of find something in there. It's basically like an array, but instead of passing in an index, we pass in a we pass in the key. So all for the details label, right? What we're going to do is we're going to first go items. Well, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to first go item detail, item information, and we're going to access using items. Index path dot route. And so basically what we're doing here is we're using this, we're using the same code here to get what the detail is, and we're going to use that to pass in for the key. So if we run our application now, I must have made some sort of a typo because the baking soda, and actually ironically it works somewhat well, because as you can see, if there is, it searched this and it couldn't find an associated key. So that shows you that it's not like an ordered. If you were using an array and you were matching up indexes, it wouldn't matter if there was a spelling difference or anything like that, because it would be numerically ordered. But because I did make a typo, that didn't appear, and as you can see, once I fix it, all of our detailed text appears, and it's the appropriate detailed text. And you can really see with this too, I can change the order of the array. So let's say I want to buy, let's say milk's a little bit more important to me for some reason. So I buy my milk first, and even though these aren't in the correct order, you'd think if they were arrays and you were matching them up, milk would say buy, it would say for milk buy a carton, it would say for eggs buy a gallon. Obviously, you can't buy a gallon of eggs. It just makes sense. But because we're using dictionaries and we search by keys, it doesn't matter the order. It's completely dynamic. And so that's how to use dictionaries and how to style a table view cell using the detail with detailed text. And if you check out in the next video, we're going to be moving on a little bit, and we're going to be using internet images to enhance our shopping list. Yes, so we're going to be creating another dictionary to store locations of pictures on the internet that we associate with our shopping list, and then add them to the cells. So make sure to check back in the next video for continued information on table views, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.